So let's talk about Huw Edwards, who this week pleaded guilty to possessing child pornography. I mean, the images that he, is in possession of are absolutely shocking. Category A images, some of the, most serious, featuring incredibly young children. I mean, Tom, I guess this is interesting because Huw had so many public defenders not that long ago. We were told when The Sun did an expose about him giving £35,000 to a crack-addicted teenager, we were told that this is, just his private life and there's nothing untoward to see here. People said that with a lot of confidence. I felt like it was very strange.
And it is worth saying that the story that was being reported on last summer, primarily by the Sun newspaper, but by other outlets as well, which was when this whole scandal kicked off, as you say, was around this allegation that he had been giving up to, I think it was about £35,000 to the 17-year-old in exchange for sexual pictures. The parents had gone to the Sun because they felt like they had no redress, that it was being used to fund a crack habit. So at the very least was deeply unseemly and very clearly in the public interest. You're talking about someone who's using their, in part, taxpayer funded wealth in order to engage in some quite unseemly activity. And obviously, as the weeks wore on, there were allegations of inappropriate behaviour from inside the corporation, etc. It was something which clearly there was a there, but because at that point, that particular story, that particular allegation, there was no criminal component to it. It was sleazy, it was unpleasant, but it wasn't criminal. And therefore, as a consequence of that, you had a lot of people saying, well, it's just his private life. It's just a complicated private life, as if there's no public interest defence here. And then obviously the way it ends up with him outing himself as this unnamed individual, of course it was shrouded in mystery originally, and then checking himself into hospital on mental health grounds. It was basically presented by a suite of people like John Sopel, formerly the BBC, now a sort of mid-wit centrist dad podcaster, Owen Jones, of course, and a few others, as a classic tabloid witch hunt. Yeah. This is, there were some people who were suggesting there was a homophobic component to it, etc., etc. Now, those people can't be criticised for their lack of clairvoyance. The case that has now brought Huw Edwards to justice hadn't even really begun and was entirely separate to that original scandal that The Sun was reporting on. At the same time, they did show a sort of remarkable lack of curiosity in that particular story, a suggestion that there was nothing unseemly whatsoever about someone giving tens of thousands of pounds to a vulnerable young person who was using it to buy drugs.
Who hasn't bought sex pictures of a vulnerable teenager to fund a drug habit?
It took on that tenor, like, what? This is outrageous. And of course, the reason they were doing it was because of the fact that they disliked the Sun newspaper and they quite like the BBC. Yeah. So the very thing that they were accusing the Sun of doing, which is that you're pursuing some sort of political vendetta, it was kind of the mirror image of that. And it was particularly telling given the fact that it seemed to cut against their own supposed principles. When Me Too hit Westminster, a lot of the commentariat was hauling Tory politicians over the coals for a fleeting hand on a knee. They're still like, oh, it's nothing, it's his private life. Owen Jones, tries to get people sacked over saying things, let alone doing things. And yet, in this instance, thought it was absolutely outrageous that there would be any consequences whatsoever to those original non-criminal but still unseemly allegations. So I think it's a reminder that the commentariat, despite often accusing other people of being biased, of being kind of warped by a certain political prejudice, that certainly played a role in their remarkable lack of curiosity, shall we say, in Huw Edwards' dark double life, which turned out to be infinitely darker than even we realised.
Yeah, Jesus. Rakib, you got any thoughts on Huw Edwards?
I actually find it all quite sad. The truth of it, he was a very well-trusted authority at our national public broadcaster. He was also the man who announced the passing of the late Queen Elizabeth II, which was a historical moment in British broadcasting. And now it's just been tarnished beyond measure because of all this. And I think I also remember that I think he spearheaded BBC's coverage of the 2019 UK general election as well. And he brought some very interesting political analysis to the table, especially from Brexit voting Wales. So all of this, it's just, I think it's just such a shame. But I think, just put that to one side, the BBC has a great deal to answer for. that they really do. Even if this was a private corporation, you'd expect very high standards of integrity when it comes to these kind of issues. But I think even more so considering it is a national public broadcaster.